Revelation 2160. From the 22nd of November 1941. God as an entity or force of nature. The universe is governed by divine laws, which have been the basis of the work of creation since eternity. No opposing power will be able to overturn or change these laws, and this regularity often determines people to deny an essential deity. And this is due to the fact that the human being himself is unstable as a being, that he often changes his will, that he arbitrarily does one thing and then another depending on his thinking, which likewise testifies to a certain arbitrariness or instability. The human being, who due to his imperfection does not yet have a certain feeling for when his actions and thoughts are so good and wise that they no longer require improvement, applies the same standard to the divine Creator, who nevertheless in his highest perfection and wisdom recognizes and has recognized the meaning and purpose of every work of creation since eternity. Consequently, his creations need no improvement but are eternally subject to the laws which God deemed wise and good, that he based his works of creation on them. The eternally unchanging therefore does not correspond to the human idea of an entity. Consequently, man usually uses the expression natural power for what he imagines under God. But everything is at the mercy of a force without will, because a determining will has to be denied to a force alone, whereas the recognition of a will also requires the recognition of an entity. A force works elementarily, and a will is then recognizable when the force is stopped. Creations would therefore constantly come into being but never change in themselves if only the power but no will was active. The will, however, only shapes what comes into being. However, the will then also causes a beingness, just as the human being as such would be an insubstantial creature, something mechanical. As well as he, although he could be active, would be without will. Only the will makes the created into an entity, just as the creative power in connection with the will must be addressed as an entity. The lawfulness in nature lets man deny a will, since eternity the same effects of the expression of power are always recognizable. The work of creation of man, however, is only slightly affected by this regularity. Although the external forms only deviate slightly from each other, every human being shapes himself, that is his inner life, as well as the external living conditions through his will. As soon as one does not want to acknowledge an entity which directs every human destiny, therefore, the human being would then be more than that power if he can overturn the lawfulness of things through his will, if he can shape and form himself, as also a work of creation of this natural power, according to his discretion, if he can even reshape natural creations through his will and his activity through precisely that will which is the characteristic of an entity. The strength which is not directed by the will would have an unrestrained effect and no order would be recognizable, for all regularity must have been established by a will which is stronger than the strength, that is, which controls the strength. Will would be impracticable without strength, but strength without will would not be the origin of a lawful creation, that is one that testifies to a certain order. Will and power together, however, characterize a being that is wise and omnipotent, which can therefore be called the source of power. Wisdom and will have set a task for every work of creation. Power without will would certainly be able to bring things into being, but without connection to each other and without purpose for each other. A creation originating from strength without will would be an immense confusion of things without purpose and goal. Therefore a will, which was used in highest wisdom, must have been active in the emergence of creation. And where will and wisdom can be recognized, it will be difficult to deny the divinity as an entity. The concept of an essential divinity makes the striving for God understandable, whereas the idea of natural power excludes a striving for it, but at the same time it also makes the most important thing, prayer, invalid. For a being can certainly be faithfully invoked in prayer, but never a force, because prayer and the hope for fulfillment also presupposes faith in a being that can fulfill every prayer. In order to be able to pray correctly, however, the human being must believe in an essential deity which, although it is inconceivable to the human being, expresses itself through precisely that natural power which is an emanation of God who, according to his plan, let those things come into being in the universe through his will which betray the wisest creative spirit. The characteristic of an essential deity. Amen.